Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar in which we'll be discussing the Conservation Reserve Program that is through USDA's Farm Service Agency. We chose to talk about this program because we realized that it's a pretty complex program. So we wanted to give you an overview of what the Conservation Reserve Program is, who is eligible, and what the program does. So as you are listening to us, you can submit questions to the chat box feature. The audience is in listen-only mode, but as you're submitting questions, my colleague who is on the line with us will filter those questions and ask them when appropriate. So please submit your questions and comments as you see appropriate. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is Cynthia Cuellar. I'm a National Outreach Specialist with the Farm Service Agency. I've been in my position for about 5 years now, and I work directly with the state outreach coordinators that are located in every state. And I work with them to figure out resources and any training that they need particular to programs and outreach within Farm Service Agency. I serve as a resource to them, and I also serve as a resource to national level organizations that work with farmers and ranchers. Today I have with me one of my other colleagues, Beverly Preston, and our partner from Women Caring for the Land that works through Women Food and Ag Network. So I'll let Beverly introduce herself first. Beverly?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Cynthia. I'm Beverly Preston. I'm the National CRP Program Manager for Farm Service Agency. I've been working on CRP for about 22 years, and I think the program manager for about 17 or 18. I did start in Farm Service Agency at a county office in Nebraska, and have been out here in Washington for about 30 years. So thanks for having me, and hopefully I can answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Beverly. And Jane, do you want to do an introduction?
Sure. I am the person who operates Women Caring for the Land, which is a program of Women Food and Agriculture Network. Women Food and Agriculture Network has been around about 21 years and has more than 10,000 members nationwide. Women Caring for the Land that I do is a style of peer-to-peer meeting for women, and it's always about some aspect of conservation, including risk management, using conservation or land transitioning in ways that protect the resources on their land. So I've done this work for more than a dozen years over the past or a dozen states over the past 11 years with many, many agency partners. Been in front of more than 3,800 women landowners. So thanks for having me on.
Great. Thank you. And I just want it to be known to the audience that this session is being recorded. So if you hear some good information on this webinar today, know that we will be recording it, captioning it, and then posting it on our USDA FSA outreach webinar page, in which other producers and partners, whoever would be interested in viewing this webinar later for more information, it will be posted there after this webinar. Again, I have my colleague Esther Lynn with us on the line who will be helping with the comments and questions. So as you're listening and have a question or comment, please feel free to utilize the chat box feature, and we'll address that accordingly. So we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about the Conservation Reserve Program. So Beverly, as the program manager for CRP, Conservation Reserve Program, can you tell us what Conservation Reserve Program is?
Sure, thank you. CRP is a voluntary conservation program that was authorized in the 1985 Food Security Act that will help owners and operators install resource conserving covers, which we call CRP practices, that will help reduce soil erosion, improve water quality, and provide wildlife habitat. And in exchange for the producer installing the CRP practice, they receive an annual rental payment and a cost share payment. Their contracts can be for 10 to 15 years.
Thank you, Beverly. And in addition to that, what are some of the benefits of the Conservation Reserve Program?
There are several ways that producers can benefit from enrolling. One of the first ones is financial, with the rental payment that provides producers a steady income for some of the less productive land. Also, wildlife. It provides habitat for wildlife, so people who want to be able to look out their window and enjoy bird watching or see the deer running through the fields. It attracts the wildlife species and it can increase pollinator habitat. And also it reduces soil erosion, can increase soil health, and provides protection of air and water quality.
Okay, great. And Jean, you have experience with working with women in conservation programs. Can you share a little bit of your background and how you've seen this program work?
Yeah, I also am a landowner. I share land with my siblings, and we've used continuous sign-up CRP. On our farm, we have 2 farmed wetlands, one which has really unfavorable soils that always ponds. And then there was another area where CRP was the right thing to use. We had a drainage tile intake that we couldn't fix because it was shared with a neighbor who controlled the timing of the repair. And until that neighbor was able to financially swing the timing of the repair, we were able to protect our land from eroding by using CRP. And it was on a broader scale than a grassed waterway. So it was just a really useful way to maintain some income as well as protect that soil.
That sounds good. And from what I'm gathering thus far with the Conservation Reserve Program, it is a complex program that has various ways in which you can access the program. So one of the ways was mentioned by Jean through the continuous CRP program. There's also CRP TIP, which is a Transition Incentives Program. There's SAFE, which is State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement, CLEAR, which is Clean Lakes, Estuaries, and Rivers. And today we'll be focusing specifically on general CRP. The reason why we want to focus specifically on general CRP is because the sign-up is coming towards the end of February, February 28th, and each of these avenues for accessing Conservation Reserve Program has their own distinct rules and sign-up eligibility requirements. So we want to focus in only on general CRP because if we take time to talk about each of these within one webinar, it would definitely go over an hour. So let's focus on general CRP. And Beverly, can you tell us what makes general CRP different than the others?
Sure. As Cynthia said, right now we're currently in a general CRP offer period, which ends in February. And general CRP is different from the other forms in that it's a competitive offer process. It's offered during a selected period of time. So right now we're at the end of a 3-month period of time that was selected for this sign-up, for Sign-up 54. General CRP is an annual sign-up, and producers' offers will be ranked against other offers nationally using an environmental benefit index, or an EBI, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And only the offers that rank high enough using the EBI will be accepted for enrollment.
Okay, so for a producer to know generally what this is, they should be aware that it's voluntary, it's competitive, there's a limited time amount in which they need to sign up, and their offers are ranked. So this is an offer that they submit to FSA in terms of what they want to do with their land, correct?
That's correct. Producers will go into the county office and work with one of the program technicians to submit their offer for enrollment into general sign-up.
Okay, great. What are some of the main eligibility requirements for general CRP? I'm aware that there's 3 land eligibility requirements. Can you tell me what those three land eligibility requirements are, Beverly?
Sure. For general CRP only, there are three ways that the land can be eligible for enrollment. One of them is to have a weighted average erodibility index, which we call an EI, of 8 or greater, or be expiring CRP. So if you're currently enrolled in CRP, you're in the last year of that contract and it's going to expire on September 30th of 2020, you would be eligible to offer during this sign-up. And also, if you have your land located in a conservation priority area, which is either a national or a state conservation priority area. And those are all determined at the county office when you're submitting your offer. They can tell you if you have the weighted average EI. They will look to ensure that you have expiring CRP or that you're located in one of those priority areas.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just envisioning being at the exhibit booth table or at an event talking with a producer, and I tell them that if they have expiring CRP by September 30th of this year, they would be eligible to enroll in general CRP. But what if their land expired, or what if they had a CRP contract and it expired in 2019? Is there something that we could do to work with them on that, or is this a very strict deadline?
That's a good question, because for this year there's a one-time opportunity for producers that have land that expired in 2017, 2018, or 2019 that have maintained their acreage as if it was enrolled, that did not have an opportunity to re-enroll that land in one of those years when it expired. They will have another opportunity to enroll that land under this general sign-up because their land will be considered expiring CRP for this sign-up. And this is a one-time opportunity that they have to be able to offer that land.
Okay, that's good to know, because
This is Jean. I was going to say that's a really good one. I know that I've got women that I've talked to who had planted trees. So that's a specific example where somebody's got trees that have been growing for, they may have been in the ground for, more than 10 years, 20 years, and they didn't really want to cut them to return the land to production in order to become eligible again. So this is a really great opportunity, as it is a one-time opportunity.
Great.
Beverly, this is Esther. We did get one question. You mentioned having producers come into the office to determine land eligibility. We do have a question from one of our listeners asking whether or not landowners should contact NRCS first, our sister agency, Natural Resources Conservation Service, or a Farm Service Agency office first. Would you be able to answer that?
Sure. To determine eligibility, as far as the basic eligibility that I talked about, as far as EI or expiring CRP or in a CPA, they should visit with their Farm Service Agency office to determine whether it meets any of that criteria. And there are some other cropping history criteria, I think, that we're going to talk about in a moment that we can also help them with.
Yes, Beverly, you did mention cropping history. So a producer does meet one of the three land eligibility requirements. So they know that they would be eligible for general CRP, but they also need to know about their cropping history, or we have to know about their cropping history. So can you tell me a little bit more about that?
That's correct. If they're for cropland, as well as meeting one of the three criteria I've already discussed, the land has to have been planted or considered planted to an agricultural commodity, so corn, soybeans, something like that, during 4 of the 6 crop years from 2012 through 2017, and also has to be physically and legally capable of being planted in a normal manner to that commodity. So it has the basic land eligibility requirements and also a cropping history requirement. And when the producer submits the offer, again, FSA will check to see if it meets this cropping history as well as meeting the other land eligibility requirements.
Great, thank you. And Dean, when you're working with producers, what are some ways that you communicate with them about CRP or like these questions that we're getting? Do I go to NRCS first, or where do I go first for resources? Can you tell me a little bit of how you work with producers?
Yeah, and a lot of times I'm working with landowners who are curious about these. Maybe their producers kind of brought it up as a possibility. So sometimes the landowners don't necessarily know what they need to bring in. But looking at their land, I just ask them, what do they see that they are concerned about? What might they be thinking could be an improvement, and where do you think that you might want to put some practices? So we'll talk to them about, is your land part of a special watershed that is designated for extra funding? Usually the local offices know that, but when we're working with people out in a meeting. And we'll also talk to them about, ask them if there's is there your land sloping? Are you concerned about dust and dusty winds that are kicking up? Are you in an area where you have small gullies that start to form and might be a sign that you need a waterway, grass waterway? So we talk to them about what they're noticing on their land, and that usually sparks their interest in looking further into CRP.
And you mentioned to me before that you usually will also look with them on heat maps. Is that correct?
Yeah, we when we work with the women landowners and producers, they love maps, and so we will often get maps, as many as what we can from NRCS. We might use color-coded maps that look at, like this one with the whole state, where you can see areas that are low productivity. And sometimes the ladies get access to the yield maps that are from the yield monitors from harvest. And those heat maps will often show areas where land is not producing very well, where it's really low yield. It may be an area that would just be an ideal place to protect, maybe along a waterway, a creek or a river that isn't as productive, that they can protect it with CRP because maybe it's flooded a lot or other things. So we do work with the maps when we're working with folks to help them understand why their land may not be yielding as much, and if we take the parts out of production that are poor, then we are sometimes able to raise the profitability on the rest of the land. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, that's great. And then, like Beverly said, there are parcels of the land that they can enroll in CRP. It doesn't have to be their entire land. That's correct, right, Beverly? That it could be parcels and pieces?
That's correct. You can enroll all or portions of a field, depending on how much you want to enroll.
Okay, great. So working with a landowner, they're looking at these aspects, they're figuring that they are eligible for CRP. What are some other eligibility requirements that they might run into, Beverly, in terms of producer eligibility?
Right. You have to have either owned or operated the land for 12 months before the close of sign-up for a general sign-up. So for this general sign-up 54 that we're in now, you had to have owned the land for 12 months before February 28th of 2020. That's one of the requirements. And then there's also other eligibility requirements such as payment limitation and adjusted gross income that are also requirements that, again, the producers can work with the FSA county office and find out what those requirements are.
Question for Beverly from Jean. What about somebody that's recently acquired land through their family and they're not really sure what to do with it and thinking that CRP might be an option? Is there an exception and where a waiver might apply in that sort of situation?
Right. They can check with the county office again, because there are certain waivers that we can give for the 12-month ownership provisions, such as if you had two brothers that were farming the land, and one owned it and the other one didn't, and then they formed a partnership, and the brother had owned it for the 12 months before the partnership was formed, but the partnership itself didn't own it for 12 months. We can look at that and have them meet the ownership provisions because the one brother had owned it for 12 months. So there are certain things that we look at that will have waivers for. So producers that are having questions about that should check with their county office to see if a waiver provision could apply for that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Beverly. And you had mentioned before that when an offer is submitted, that the environmental benefits index will be determined from their offer. So that's the EBI. Can you tell me a little bit more of what this EBI is?
Sure. The EBI is a ranking tool that we use that will provide a relative ranking of the offer that is submitted based on, we have 5 environmental factors and a cost factor. The first 3 factors that are in the EBI, wildlife, water quality, and erosion, are all based on 100 points. And those are the 3 primary purposes of CRP. Then we have a 4th factor, which is called enduring benefits. So how much longer after the contract expires would we think we might get benefits from what that practice is? And that is up to 50 points. Then there is another factor that's air quality, which is 45 points, and then a cost factor, which is determined by the secretary, and that cost factor can vary. And then once the cost factor is determined, and that's after sign-up is over, that would be your full EBI score, and there's a cutoff that's determined at the end of sign-up after all that information is in, that the secretary chooses the cutoff. And then offers that are above that cutoff will get a contract or are offered a contract.
So this is Jean. Beverly, when we talk to landowners and producers, one of the things that some of the women landowners don't necessarily know is that they can adjust their rental rate to be more competitive. They can accept a lower rental rate, and that can help. But are there other ways somebody can affect their EBI to help make them more competitive?
Sure. Thanks, Jean. As you mentioned, producers can offer below the maximum payment rate, so rental rate adjustment, as you just mentioned, that can give them additional points in the EBI, and that's in percentage below. So you can go up to 15% below and get points in the EBI based on that. Also, the selection of the cover and the species mix will drive your points. So rather than providing a 20 or a 40-point cover, you could select to provide a 50-point cover, which obviously would give you more points. And then there are some enhancement points that are provided for things like wildlife food plots and pollinator habitat, and also under this general sign-up, safe project areas also receive additional points. And these are the few areas that the producer's choice will affect the EBI, because most of the EBI is based on location and soils, which the producer doesn't really have much of an option to choose, although they could choose the north part of the field rather than the south, I guess, to get to different soils if they thought that might help. But these are the primary ways that it can affect the EBI.
Okay, so we know that there's a land eligibility requirement. The producer has some requirements that they must meet as well to be eligible. The EBI score affects whether their offer might be accepted or not. So this is a lot to think about. These are a lot of processes and eligibility requirements. Beverly, from an FSA point of view, talking to a producer or landowner, what should we tell them in terms of how to prepare? When should they come into our office and start talking with us? How long would that process take for them?
Well, the sooner the better to get into the county office, especially as we are heading toward the last few weeks of this general sign-up. But as far as how long it takes, it really depends on if the producer has been in our county office before and has other farms, and so we have some of those records already, and they've submitted their eligibility forms for payment limitation and adjusted gross income and those kinds of things. Or if they're a brand new producer, have never been into the county office before, this is the first time they've had a farm, maybe they inherited it and it's the first time they're going to be in the office to do anything, it's going to take a little bit longer because we're going to want to explain those things to them, make sure we get them in our records, and get all the information that we need for them. So it's really important when they're making the appointment to let our folks in the county office know I'm a brand new producer, or I've just bought this new farm and needs to be potentially added to another one. So all of those things will go into how long it will take to actually do the sign-up.
Okay, and then Jean, from your perspective, go ahead,
Can I
Esther.
ask one more Can I ask one more question related to coming into the office? Beverly, if a farmer is in the process of acquiring a farm number with Farm Service Agencies, or for those folks who aren't familiar with what a farm number is, it really is, kind of registering you as producer as well as where you're farming with a Farm Service Agency. If a producer is still in the process of acquiring that farm number, can he or she still apply for the Conservation Reserve Program?
When you say acquiring the farm number, I'm not exactly certain what you mean, but
so let's say that the producer doesn't have a farm number yet.
Okay.
What should they do?
When they come into the county office, if they can bring us the records that show that they're the owner of this farm, so that may be a deed, it may be some other document that they can bring in that shows us that they're the owner of this piece of property. And if it's something that we do not have in our county office currently, we can set up in our farm record system a farm number and get all the information that we need to do that. So once that's done and they have the farm number, they can begin enrollment.
Okay, thank you. And Jean, I just wanted to get your perspective from women caring for the land. Are there other ways that you prepare a landowner before they come into the office to FSA to begin this type of paperwork, or are there other resources that you kind of tell them to look at to prepare them?
Yeah, this is really a big area where we spend a fair amount of time working with the ladies that come to our meetings. Some of them have just inherited land, and so they are not used to dealing with this, and they may be, have lived their life in Chicago, and all of a sudden they've got land somewhere else, and they don't know a lot about the local resources, and they may travel a great distance to get the kind of information they need. And so we let them know that, you're going to need to walk in with some things that will help you have a very efficient, productive first meeting. But, we are also sympathetic if they've just had a death in that part of that transition. Sometimes it takes them a year to get there, really remember stuff. You've told them and told them, and they don't seem to take action. They may be dealing with what you might call grief brain. So we kind of are gentle with them, help them understand what those things are. And I tell you, they are so excited to have the resources to protect their land. Some of them just don't know that there is a possibility. So they are so grateful when they come in and, are met with a friendly FSA office person that will help them understand what the deadlines are, what the program requirements are, how the flow goes. So a lot of what we do is help them understand that, it's a process. So you might sign up and it might take a while before you know whether you're accepted or not, and then it might take a while longer until, money starts to flow. So we just kind of let them know that there's a time flow to these things that they may not be expecting or to be used to. So in addition to, protecting the land, which we talked to them about in some detail, we also try to help them understand what it means to be involved in a government program. And sometimes they want to know if they want to enroll land and their renter, they're just not real sure. What they want to know is that they're asking something that's reasonable of their renter, so that if they get pushback, that they don't feel like they're, asking for something that's unreasonable. And sometimes they need to know that. Other times they need to know enough to say yes, because their renter is asking for something that's a wonderful way to protect their land, and they, maybe have newly inherited it, and all of a sudden there's an opportunity to protect it, a whole field that's just been poorly performing. The renter isn't making a whole lot off of it, and it's one of those areas that really needs some erosion protection. So we just try to help them understand some of the ins and outs, and to be ready to work with FSA when they start that working relationship. Beverly, about how long does it take for offers to be accepted?
Well, after sign up ends and the cost factor is determined and the EDI cutoff score is determined, normally there is a press release that's issued, and also in conjunction with the press release that's issued, there will be a national CRP accepted and rejected notice that is issued to our state and county offices that will tell them, here's the EDI cutoff score, and it will tell them what the ranking is and who the producers are that have accepted and rejected offers. And once that happens, a producer that submitted an offer will get a letter one way or the other. They'll either receive a letter that says you've been accepted into the program. It will give them a certain amount of time to say that they want to continue with that offer or not. And likewise, someone who had a rejected offer will get a letter that says your offer was rejected, and it will tell them why. So that happens after sign-up is over.
Well, I can say that I certainly appreciate the letters that FSA sends out, because I appreciate the reminders of when, things are due and how to get that process started. So beginning to understand what, we need to do to fulfill the plan that we get. So I don't know if Cynthia's back on again or not, but we're just kind of going on without you.
Well, this is Esther. Let me ask Jean a quick question. Jean,
sure.
Can you talk a little bit about how you've worked with producers or what you've heard from producers after they've been approved for a CRP contract?
Yeah, there are often questions of how to get some of the work done, and they may or may not have that labor component already figured out. So being able to direct them to vendors, the vendor list of people that serve that particular area helps them get access to it. We've got a situation in the county that I'm in right now where a landowner has signed up for a practice that he had gotten started with somebody with a project, and the vendor has delayed, and he's sweating the deadlines to try to get things done, and the vendor all of a sudden has stopped. So working back and forth with landowners and producers to help them get the jobs done, I think that really helps. And finding sources for seed if you need seeding, and getting things done. I think the deadlines where you watch for when you're taking care of mid-contract management, making sure that you're not burning or getting into the CRP when there's nesting. So we do spend some time talking about those kinds of things too.
Thank you, Jean. This is Cynthia. I am back. I apologize for that technical difficulty I was having, but I appreciate you all moving on with the show. But I'll jump back in and continue on with the next slide. Let's see. We are at what to be aware of and to start planning. So again, the deadline for general CRP is February 28th. So what producers and landowners should start doing is scheduling an appointment with their local FSA staff. And when they do that phone call to schedule their appointment, let them know what they're interested in. So I'm thinking about general CRP. What documents should I bring with me to the office to better prepare them for their visit? So start working with us as soon as possible, and looking to other organizations like Women Food and Ag Network, Women Caring for the Land, for resources that they could provide in understanding and going through this journey of figuring out Conservation Reserve Program, which offer would be best for you, and how to submit those documents. So we have here on the PowerPoint slide a couple of web links that will send you to the Women Food and Ag Network, as well as a journey brochure for Conservation Reserve Program that they put together in terms of understanding the program, going through the different stages of it. We also have some Conservation Reserve Program fact sheets on our FSA website. And I have here to find your local USDA Farm Service Agency Service Center, there's a web link there that you can click on to find that. And again, this webinar is being recorded. These slides, as well as the recording, will be posted to the FSA Outreach webinar site. So I'll pause here for a second. Esther, do we have any additional questions?
We do. I'm just going to scroll through, and we got quite a few at the beginning that, pertain to some of the slides that we covered earlier, or the topics that we covered earlier. And so I'll ask our speakers to maybe dig back into some of the content that we covered already, but let me just go through real quick. We had a question about the points related to CRP, related to the offer for CRP. Beverly, can you talk about whether or not there's a minimum number of points in order to be for an offer for CRP to be accepted?
Sure. There is not a minimum number per se that, like, we go out before sign-up starts and say you have to have 100 points, because the EDI cutoff will drive that. So we don't know until sign-up is over what that cutoff point will be. So producers need to, while they're making that offer, make the offer to get to the point value that they think will be the best point amount for them to meet whatever the EDI cutoff will be. I know that sounds a little difficult, and it is, because it's a little bit of a guessing game. So the better the offer, the more likely you will have to have an acceptable offer when the EDI cutoff is selected.
And can a producer work with, the Farm Service Agency staff in the office to maybe understand some of the ins and outs and the pieces of the offer?
Sure, they can work with the county office to help them to show them what the different point values are, what the different cover mixes are that will give you more or less points, where there could be some enhancement opportunities that will also provide more points. And then, like we discussed, offering below the maximum payment rate is always an area that can get you some additional EBI points. So just visit with your local county office and they can help you to understand that EBI a little bit better.
We had a question about the cropping history requirement and whether or not that applies to forest land.
The cropping history applies to cropland. It does not apply to marginal pasture land, but we have cropland and marginal pasture land that are eligible for CRP.
There's a question here about how long it takes to get an answer about being accepted. I know that folks, you all had discussed how there is a process after the application deadline at the department. But typically, can you give folks an idea of how long it takes to hear back about being accepted? And can you also cover one more time how folks will hear whether or not they've been accepted?
Sure. There's no set amount of time as far as once sign-up is over and to when the accepted and rejected offers will be announced. It has been in the past anywhere from just a couple of weeks to a month or longer. I know there's always consideration given to wanting to get that information out as soon as possible, keeping in mind that producers are wanting to make planting and other management decisions. So we always try to keep that in mind, but there is no set amount of time. As far as after sign-up is over, once the EBI cutoff is determined, like I said, a national notice will be issued, as well as normally a press release from the department is also issued saying we had X number of offers, this number of offers were determined acceptable, and that producers will start receiving notification of offer acceptability. And so that offer acceptability is the producer receiving that letter that says you were accepted into the program, do you want to continue, or getting the letter that says your offer was rejected and here are some other possibilities for you. It may say you may offer under continuous sign-up if you want to do buffers or wetlands or something else that even though you didn't get into general sign-up, you may have an opportunity somewhere else within CRP.
And say a producer is accepted into the program, when does that contract actually begin?
The contracts for general sign-up begin on October 1 of this year.
And this is probably a good point to plug our Gov Delivery newsletters. If our customers are not signed up for regular newsletters from the Farm Service Agency, you can go to FSA, which stands for Farm Service Agency, fsa.usda.gov. There's a link on the site where you can sign up to get regular newsletters, and that will also be a way that you can hear that acceptance letters are going out the door. Beverly, can you talk a little bit about, what if a landowner decides to sell their land within that 10-year contract that they've signed with FSA?
Sure. If you have a landowner who has a CRP contract and at some point in time they decide to sell that contract, that's fine. When they sell that contract, the producer that they sell that contract to then will have an option to succeed to that contract, so to take it over or not. If the producer that they sell the land to decides that they want to succeed to that contract and take it over, we'll go ahead and do that succession and go forward with the contract with the new owner. If that new owner does not want to succeed to that contract, that's not a requirement. However, the previous owner would owe annual rental and cost share back for all the years that they were in the CRP contract.
One last question here, and I will also say we did get a number of questions that are probably more appropriate for some individual follow-up, and so thank you for sharing your contact information. If you had a question, our staff will follow up afterwards by email with you if there's something that we weren't able to answer on the call today. But one last question, are there any special programs for beginning farmers and ranchers? So if a producer is in their first or second year of farming, are there programs for them? And Beverly, I'm hoping that you can maybe just briefly talk a little bit about TIP, the Transition Incentives Program, and then I will also point folks to an NRCS program some NRCS programs that offer incentives for beginning farmers.
Sure. As Esther mentioned, we have the Transition Incentives Program, or TIP, which is set up for beginning farmers and ranchers, and that is that a CRP contract holder can transition their contract in the year that it's expiring, or actually the year before, also, to a beginning farmer or rancher. And the producer or the CRP participant then will get 2 additional annual rental payments that were the CRP annual rental payments after they transition that land. So again, if you're a contract holder for CRP, you can transition that land to a beginning farmer or rancher and receive 2 additional annual rental payments.
I might jump in here and say that this is really a program that women, when we have our Women Caring for the Land meetings, there are a lot of women that are very interested in that program, and I've heard personally of some that have followed up and taken advantage of that TIP program. So make sure that if you've got somebody coming in that's new into the office, at least let them know what this is, because they might plan for the future. They're a lot of times really good planners for the future and looking long term. So it's a great program.
Right. And I will mention, it used to be that it was only for retired and retiring owners or operators that could transition. Now it's open up to any contract holder. So that was a change in this last farm bill. So it is not limited to retired and retiring.
Thank you for that. And I will also mention or point producers or customers to newfarmers.usda.gov. There's information there around about a whole host of conservation programs that USDA has that contain special incentives for limited resource producers, beginning farmers and ranchers, socially disadvantaged producers, tribal producers, as well as military veteran producers.
Okay, this is Cynthia back on the line. I believe that was the end of our questions. However, we do keep a log of all of the questions that are submitted in the chat box feature. So if you have additional questions that haven't been addressed or you haven't inserted them into the chat box, please feel free to send us those questions, and we from the Outreach Office will get back to you individually, or you can send us an email directly at fsaoutreach@usda.gov. I want to take another moment to say thank you to both of our presenters today, Dr. Jean Eales and Beverly Preston. I appreciate you both for taking time out of your day and appreciate your passion and dedication to our farmers and ranchers out there and to the Conservation Reserve Program and providing all the resources that we're able to talk about. I'll pause here for one last comment or anything else. Esther?
Yeah, if I can just provide the direct link to listeners where they can access a recording of this webinar, as well as some of those additional resources, Cynthia, that you had posted on the screen a little bit earlier. Folks can go to fsa.usda.gov. So FSA stands for Farm Service Agency, fsa.usda.gov/outreach. And you'll find those resources under the left-hand side link that's labeled Outreach Webinars.
Okay. So with that, we will call this webinar to a close, and I appreciate everybody for taking the time to listen with us. Thank you and have a good day.